I'm going to turn back to our top story, the latest developments in Ukraine. And for more on that, we're joined by Rod Thornton, a research fellow in the Defense Studies Department at King's College London. Thanks so much for being with us here on France 24. Ukraine has said it was observing Victory Day today, the 8th, along with the rest of Europe, while Russia has its celebrations planned for tomorrow. Can you just talk about the significance of Victory Day for Vladimir Putin and how it reflects what's happening on the ground in Ukraine at the moment?
Yeah, sure. For Putin, Victory Day is his link as leader of the Russian people, his link back to the heroic struggle of the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany during the Second World War. So he sees a direct link between him as the kind of successor to great leaders in the Russian sense, like Stalin. So he sees himself as the new fighter against fascism, the new defender of Russia against what they see as the fascist regime in Ukraine. So it's very much him advertising the fact that he's standing up against fascism, and here's his military on parade, and showing that the power also of the Russian state, the military power, and that military power reflects well on Putin himself. So Putin, it's very important, this May Day parade. This is why it's going ahead in Moscow, but not going ahead in other Russian cities because of security concerns.
Well, for many weeks, we've been talking about this expected spring counteroffensive by Ukraine, and there are reports that some Ukrainian leaders are worried that it won't live up to the expectations. What kind of military position is Kyiv in at this moment?
Well, Kyiv supposedly has something like 60,000 troops ready for an offensive campaign somewhere against Russia, against some really dug in Russian defenses now. Remember, for months now, the Russians haven't really been doing that much offensive activity. They've been digging in, ready for any Ukrainian offensive. So the Ukrainians, yes, they've been building up their capabilities, they've been training, they've been gathering equipment, they've been gathering weapons that the West has supplied. But it's 60,000. It isn't that big a force if you look at the great scheme of things. They can only really take on one element of the kind of Russian forward lines, and that's where they kind of concentrate. But the problem for the Ukrainians is this kind of combined arms campaign, which they're trying to do now in this new offensive. It's very hard to get it to coordinate, and this is why the training is so vital. And it's being perceived that the Ukrainians really haven't mastered it yet, and so this expected offensive might be delayed by several weeks.
Let's talk about these evacuations happening near the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. How concerned should we be about the fighting there and a potential nuclear incident? I mean, we are, after all, talking about the continent's largest nuclear power plant.
Yes, we are. And it's an obvious offensive target for any campaign that the Ukrainians might launch, because to get the major power plant back, so to kind of drive the Ukrainian economy. So on the surface, it looks like an offensive aim of the Ukrainian military. But if they do assault around Zaporizhia, the Russians really might cause some sort of incident. Remember, the Russians will use Zaporizhia nuclear plant to kind of site artillery positions, to site rocket positions, knowing the Ukrainians cannot launch their own rockets and their own artillery at those sites because of the fear of damaging the one power generator that's still running at Zaporizhia.
Well, let's also talk about what's happening in Bakhmut at the moment. You know, the head of the Wagner military group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has backed off threats that he would pull out his troops from the city, saying he's received reassurances from Moscow on shortages of ammunition. But it was a bizarre series of events that started on Friday. In those videos he released, basically cussing out Kremlin officials. How do you explain this apparent change of mind from Prigozhin?
Well, Prigozhin has been putting pressure on the military, i.e. the Ministry of Defense, to supply him and his forces, his Wagner forces, with kind of artillery, to supply artillery support to his troops on the ground around Bakhmut. So he's kind of testing the waters, Prigozhin, by putting pressure on the military, and the military have caved in. The military are now supporting the Wagner forces around Bakhmut and in Bakhmut with artillery fire. So he's got what he wanted. But the military, they've been waiting for the offensive campaign by the Ukrainians, and for that they need artillery. So they don't want, for the MOD, the main armed forces, they don't want to waste their artillery supporting Prigozhin and his Wagner forces around Bakhmut. They'd rather use their artillery for where they think the Ukrainian offensive will take place. So there's a kind of dispute over what's the best use of finite resources on the Russian side.
Okay, we want to thank you, Rod Thornton, Research Fellow in the Defense Studies Department at King's College London. Thanks so much, as always, for your insight and for joining us here on France 24.